Well, we're back to comedies. We took a brief break with Dangerous Minds, and we are right back on the comedy train with probably one of the most stacked comedian casts I have seen in a movie ever. Again, I do minimal research on movies that I haven't seen before prior to watching the movie, and yes, I haven't watched The 40-Year-Old Virgin until today. But I had a really good time. I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I'm glad that my movie watching experience met those expectations. I'm normally not a comedy person. I know I've mentioned that a couple of times before, but again, the whole hearing nothing but good things about this kind of set a precedence for me, and so I was really, really hoping that I would enjoy this one, and I did. It was good. I liked it. It wasn't too crazy or over the top. It was still silly by its own right, but nothing too crazy like Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Yeah, I'm throwing that one under the bus again. But before I get to all of my thoughts on this film, let's go ahead and get those box office stats and a recap of the plot. With a budget of $26 million, the 40-Year-Old Virgin generated an overall domestic revenue of $109,449,237 at the box office. Unfortunately, it was knocked out of first place its first month in office by The Dukes of Hazzard, which was released earlier that August, only making $53,946,530, while The Dukes of Hazzard raked in $75,310,334. In a nutshell, the 40-Year-Old Virgin follows Andy, the wizard in question, after it comes to light that he's never done the deed. His moronic co-workers, David, Jay, and Cal, go on a wild crusade to get him laid, but instead of simply swiping his V-card, Andy ends up in a relationship with a single mother, Trish. A simple enough plot that these idiots made anything but simple. Moving right along to those opinions.
You know what? I respect women. I love women. I respect them so much that I completely stay away from them.
So this movie was absolutely stacked as far as the cast goes with comedians. We have, of course, Steve Carell playing Andy, Paul Rudd as David, Romany Malco as Jay, and Seth Rogen as Cal. We have Jane Lynch as Paula, their boss, and then we have everyone under the sun as extras like Leslie Mann, Jonah Hill, Kevin Hart, Elizabeth Banks, and so many more. It was ridiculous. And it was kind of this really fun Easter egg hunt, right? To see how many that I could identify and collect, if you will. I cannot stress enough how moronic all of the people at this store were. They're all electronic salesmen selling TVs, VCRs, DVD players, all that hot stuff for 2005. And oh my God, they are all nutso in their own rights. You have, I guess, let's start with Seth Rogen's character, Cal. His opener, his introduction to his character was the bit about going to Tijuana to watch some crazy show with a chick and a horse, and I'm not gonna go into it because I was sitting there with my jaw hitting the floor like, what? It's that Family Guy meme. Who the fuck starts a conversation like that? I just sat down. Well, that was that. And his character didn't get much better. I think that was the worst of it for his character, but oh my God, he was just gross. A little bit sleazy. All three of the coworkers are sleazy in their own right. Well, maybe not David, but at least Jay and Cal were both pretty gross. Jay being the worst of them. Jay was an absolute asshole. He's a serial cheater, has Andy lie for him to get him out of a situation with his wife, girlfriend, I can't remember which one she was. He was the one that put the most pressure on Andy to go get laid, even though Andy didn't want to. None of these guys took no for an answer. I will start off with that. Andy tells them that he's perfectly fine. He's happy where he's at. It was clear that where he was uncomfortable was talking to them or having been found out that he was a virgin, but it wasn't necessarily like he was fine with it. It was okay. But Jay, he's like, yeah, no, we're gonna go find drunk people and drunk people only. Make sure there's like vomit in the hair, all that lovely, not fun, don't mess with that stuff, and was just very crass and nasty. Truly, he was worse than Seth Rogen. They were both kind of like, yeah, we'll hook up with whoever, but like Jay was he was trash. Let's be real. He was trash, and he was okay with being trash. he openly admitted it, until it came to Jill, his girlfriend, and then it was like, don't tell her. Cal was very much, I am what I am. I like what I like. I'm okay with crazy. Let's do it. David, Paul Rudd's character, honestly, I would say that he was probably the best of the three. He was entirely hung up on his ex-girlfriends, which was pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie. And he was probably the most bro out of all three. The scene where it's revealed, very beginning, where they're sitting around playing poker, they end up figuring out that Andy is a virgin. They're all kind of like, bro, we're just gonna get you laid. Like, no big deal, it's fine. Andy freaks out, but then the next day he bumps into Cal. Everything's chill. They're not making fun of him. He bumps into David. He starts to think, okay, it's fine. And then like a random person comes up and they're like, yo, so you're a virgin. And like Jay is standing on top of a desk and blasting to everyone and just like making fun of him, wherein Andy runs out of the store. I'm not gonna lie. The scene immediately after the poker game where he's having an embarrassment breakdown and then through the night he's just sitting there awake thinking about how everything's gonna go wrong. That was a total vibe. I'm sure all of us out there at one point in our lives, you know, it's that little thought that's kind of poking on your brain at like 4 a.m. in the morning. Hey, do you remember that one time when you did that really stupid thing? Yeah, perfect embodiment of that. Honestly, Andy was a whole ass meme. I'm not gonna lie. The embarrassment breakdown, him hanging out in his nerd palace, his house. And by the way, which was hecking awesome, as a collector, that opening scene where he's just walking through his house and he's got all of the collectibles in boxes, just his house completely and totally filled, no free wall space. I was totally geeking out. And it made me so happy to see a fellow nerd. Honestly, when he's talking about how he's got a very fulfilling life, and then it cuts to the montage of him just geeking out in his house, I'm like, you know what? I think that very much does, in fact, look fulfilling. I genuinely think he does look happy because I geek out and do some of those things at home too. So I definitely thought that it did look very fulfilling. It made me extremely sad whenever the single mom that he's into, she agrees to come pick him up to go on a date. And David and Cal are in his house and they're like, whoa, she's coming here, but your house is totally wild, man. Like, we got to get rid of some of the stuff. I'm like, don't you dare touch his stuff. How dare you touch his stuff? How dare you take it off the walls? And when she opens up the door and it's just empty behind him, I'm like, no, be proud of all of that. That's so cool. And sure enough, Trish, played by Catherine Keener, she doesn't mind it. She does actually help him sell some of his collection to help him maybe get enough funds to open his own store. But yeah, she's really chill. I really, really liked her. She was just totally normal. And with all of like these crazy comedians running around doing crazy comedian things, it was just kind of refreshing to have like the one normal cast member. They just looked so happy together. And the conversations that Andy and Trish had together, they seemed really easy and there was zero judgment. And yes, he would be like freaking out whenever they were getting intimate at points because again, he's a virgin and he won't tell her because he's super embarrassed by it. Like, even without the three morons or really everyone, it's not just the three of them, but again, those three were really like taking him out to go do crazy things to get him laid. But by the time it comes out at the end, she's of course like, oh, it's no big deal. You were being really weird about it, and I kind of assumed the worst, but that's literally all it is. That's totally chill. They do end up having a fight to add, I mean, we do have to have a scripted fight, right, in rom-coms. It did seem a little bit weird, because when they agree 20 dates, no schmeh, and then on the 20th date, they can. So she's finally like, it's the 20th date, let's do this. They're falling on top of boxes, his figures, his collectibles that he'd end up packaging, and he ends up freaking out because he's like, no, these boxes can't get squashed and everything because they'll lose their value, which is valid, by the way. He's not wrong, but to everyone else that are like, dude, these are just action figures, it's kind of like, okay, whatever. She gets a little bit upset because she's like, but I want to do this. But so it was just a little bit weird that, I don't know, she immediately got mad because he was like, no, let's just move the figures out of the way. And then he, of course, kind of snaps a little bit. And I don't blame him because the entire movie is just everyone poking and prodding him to go have schmeh. You see like bad experience he's had, so it makes sense. So whenever it's finally about to happen, he just freaks out. And of course, like, there's too much change because he's also getting rid of all of these things that he's loved and has had in his house, and it was just a big moment and too many things were going on, so it makes sense why he kind of blew up. I guess it kind of made sense why Trish also blew up. I guess, I don't know, I'm a little less forgiving, question mark, about her side of the fight. Woman wants to get laid. All right, we shouldn't be this angry about it. Like, there's clearly something going on besides getting laid. Maybe we should talk, like they clearly have been the entire film, to see what's going on there before just jumping to, like, I'm mad, let's smash now. So it was kind of weird, but it was also like, okay, it makes sense. It was both, and I was just kind of willing to go with it. Especially because, oh my gosh, his coworkers, they were terrible. Again, they would not take no for an answer. They kept putting him in all of these horrible situations with terrible advice. Like, they take him to a bar. They're like force coaching him to go pick up women. It doesn't go well. Like, think drunk driving and accidents. He goes to a bookstore where, I'm not gonna lie, he actually pulled it off with the bookseller. I was like, you did really well. You did really well, Grasshopper. But of course, that's short-lived and things end up just going south for him again. They shove him into speed dating because he doesn't act on the bookseller, because at that point he's interested in Trish. So good for you for keeping your priorities straight. It keeps escalating. The situations keep escalating, and that's what made it cringe. Anytime the three amigos were put together and were like, all right, Andy, let's go do a thing, I was just prepared to cringe. Every time it was Andy and Trish, I was like, okay, we can breathe and relax a little bit. Every time Jane Lynch entered the screen, she does a really good job of giving these horrible, awkward backstories, and basically everything I've seen her in, I was just like, please just shush. Just shush. We don't need that here. But I will say that the two good pieces of advice that came a little too late from his coworkers was, one, tell Trish that he's a virgin, because he's just getting so anxious and wound up every time they bring it up, which makes sense because they will not stop heckling him. The second piece of advice, and it was really, I guess, an intervention at the end, was whenever Andy actually goes with the bookseller back to her house, and his coworkers follow him to be like, don't do this, you like Trish. And he's like, yeah, no, I was headed out anyways, I didn't want to do this. So yay, good. Drunk decision's bad, but I'm glad that you made the right choice in the end to leave. So I will give them those 2 shiny blue stars for those 2 good pieces of advice. Naturally, everyone ends up with someone in the end. Jay and his girlfriend kind of make up because the girlfriend is pregnant. Cal ends up with the bookseller. David ends up with another girl who rages about her ex-boyfriend just as much as he rages about his ex-girlfriend, so they have something in common there. And then naturally, Andy and Trish end up together and get married. And I love that at the end, they still have waited for their first time until after they are married. And oh my God, the time cards where it's like them in bed and it fades to black and it's like 1 minute later and she's just sitting there like, what the hell? And he's like, whoa. And she's like, you want to go again? And he's like, absolutely. And then it's 2 hours later and then she's drained and he's like, I'm ready to go again. I thought it was hysterical, and I thought that it was going to be like 2 minutes later. So I'm glad it was like, yes, 2 hours. You go, bro. You go, bro. You did it, bro. It was a really funny scene. But then we go into an interpretive dance sequence and lip syncing sequence to Aquarius. And I was like, okay, that's where you lost me. In the last 2 minutes of the film, 3 minutes, however long that song was, that sequence was, that's where it lost me. And I'm like, you know what? If you made it through 2 hours and that's where it happens, you did good. Again, not a comedy person, just because I haven't liked a lot of the ones I'd watched. But this one was good, barring the Aquarius interpretive dance sequence. I was especially wary about this film after being burned by Pee-wee's Big Adventure. But I'm glad that it did not hurt me so like Pee-wee did. I'm very happy that this film lived up to all of the praise that I've heard. Let me know your opinions on this film. If you're angry that I missed a certain comedian's appearance, throw them in the comments to give them their recognition and restore their wounded pride. There were just so many, I know I missed a few. Drop your favorite quotes from the film because there were a ton that made me laugh out loud. But until then, I will see you guys next time in 2015.